Thank you all so much. I'm so excited, first of all, to have the first convening in person in a long time, and the first one of the Olivia Mitchell Youth Council. So congratulations to each of you. You know, I revived the Youth Council, the Mayor's Youth Council, when I became mayor. I had served on the city council. It'll come on, you can hold your ears because you weren't alive, but at 21, well, a couple of you were, but 21 years ago I joined the city council. I was just leaving my 20s and becoming a 30-something-year-old. And as I served on the city council, about 5 or 6 of my colleagues had served on Mayor Tom Bradley's youth council. And it really made an impression on me that the more that we can teach civic activism and how City Hall works and empower young people, they're the leaders not just of tomorrow, but as I always said when I was your age and people would say, the leaders of tomorrow, but yes, you're also the leaders of today. And to feel that, to know that, to hold that power at a moment when the main issues that we face, from violence to climate change, to things like gender equity and coming out of pandemic, are in many ways going to be led by you and are being led by you. So thank you for taking the time to be here. I see a little bit of orange. I'm sure you didn't change your phone case to today, right? No. You already like the orange? But you know, I'm wearing orange with a lot of my colleagues today, you know, to try to raise awareness around the country. Longtime member of Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and been working on this issue for entirely too long. I was today with somebody who is moving to Canada. Actually, it was last night, excuse me. She's the former head of Heal the Bay, one of the great environmental groups that really teaches us about water quality and equity, and teaching us about what we can do on water and plastics. She's moving to Canada, and you see after violence in our country how swiftly another country moves to ban handguns on top of the laws that they have to protect people. Whereas here I was reading an article in The Way of somebody who, from the Republican Party, who said that he supported an assault weapons ban. He had such a backlash just in a few days, he said he's not even running for re-election. And what's kind of wrong, regardless of party, regardless of your partisanship, of what's wrong in this country when we cannot somehow come together, at least those who are in power and the generations that hold those positions outside of local government. In some states, we seem to be broken. But I hope that today we can listen to the concrete things we can do here to take steps to save lives, full stop, because that's what this is about. And we know school shootings get a lot of the attention, as well they should. We see what happened in Buffalo, where Black Americans were literally hunted down because of the color of their skin and their heritage by these incredibly racist kind of white supremacist arguments that suddenly, years after we thought those were dead in America, have been revived. But we also know that here in Los Angeles, more likely to be the victim of gun violence, and the ones that don't make the headlines, the one-off, the two-off, the steady stream, and of course the violence that affects people with suicides and firearms and everything else. So I'm really excited to listen. I promise not to do much talking. My goal today, I always like to start meetings saying, if we achieve X, Y, and Z, it will be a successful meeting. It's one of the ways I always run meetings as a mayor. So this will be a successful meeting if you give me and other city leaders ideas for things we can do at the local level. 2, where we can come together and see the non-legislative things we can do, building on the great work the Youth Council that looked at gun violence a few years ago that got suspended during the pandemic, to raise awareness among young people and Angelenos about daylighting their stories, telling their stories, and empowering at the local level, kind of the non-legislative work we can do. And 3rd, the way we can help push that at the state and national level. And this has been a group that's been really active in helping push for some state legislation that's gotten through and others that hasn't. So I think you've all, I hope you've had a chance to look at some of those things. If not, happy to go through some of those bills that legislators have put forward and that the Youth Council supported and got passed and signed into law. Others that got passed but got vetoed, and others that haven't gotten passed at all, or other ideas that you have. So that's kind of, but I always like starting with people's experiences. So why don't I open it up? And if somebody, I know if you're on the Youth Council, you're probably not the shy retiring type, but I always tell people when I was a teacher, I always loved listening to the last person to speak, because usually I was more often a young woman than a young man when I was in a classroom who would listen to their peers and kind of process. But we do need people at the very beginning to be the brave ones to speak first. But I hope you all listen to each other. You might have an idea in your head right now, but listen and think. And I always feel that you speak with more power if you're able to bring that after you kind of consolidate and listen. It's what I've tried to do as mayor. You can come in with your, beating your chest saying, I'm right and I've got these ideas, or you can listen and then really summarize what people are doing as well as bring something to it, and I always find that more powerful. But who will be brave volunteers? Speak a little bit about, I'd like you, if you can speak personally, just to share with all of us some of your experiences with violence, whether you've seen it at home, in the community. It takes courage, and don't feel that you have to, but I think it always brings home that this is not some abstract issue just about legislation. This is something we all, and that you as young Angelenos feel, and how has violence affected you in your education, even if it's feelings about what you've seen the last couple of weeks in this country. So, who'd like to go first? Go ahead, and tell me your name again, because I came in during the introduction. Just
I'm Charlie Say. I'm from CVDC.
Good to see you.
Well, like a small story I had was that, I didn't really think that I would be I wasn't like a necessarily active shooter, but I was at Knott's Berry Farm, I say, a month or two ago. Mm-hmm. And we're about to get on the ride, and my mom calls me. She's like, I need you to take care of your sister and your cousin. There's a shooter, because someone had got shot and jumped over the fence by a drive-by. And then everyone started running around, everyone got crazy, and we all ran outside. The police were there.
Where do you live?
Oh, I live over here in CV13, Rampart Village.
Rampart Village.
So the police were there and stuff, and my mom and grandma were separated from all of us, so I had to take care of them all. And so, and then the shooter came by the other way and came and shot one or two people in the front. Mm-hmm. And then we all had to run the other way, all the way to our cars, and we didn't even know my mom and grandma had made it out yet, so we were just waiting at the car, and they walked up and we just hugged each other. Mm-hmm. But another problem I think I have is I live on Rampart Village, and, right at the border. There's multiple gangs like MS, 18s, all those different types of gangs, and I feel like to really tackle these those gang related problems with gun violence, we have to really invest in our youth and the GRID programs, the gang reduction, youth development. And I've worked personally with Community Warriors for Peace, and we did block parties, we've done food distributions, turkey giveaways, and just doing the small things, providing access to resources, helping those kids. I did a workforce thing with Salif. We had a little summer program workforce, and they took us everywhere, showing us environments and opportunities outside of our own. And I feel like stuff like that can help is realize that resulting to gang violence or just resulting to any type of violence is not their only option. They have other options outside of that.
Thank you,
so that's just one point.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Charlie. Who else? Jump in. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. Diana Vicente, District 14. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Diana.
I think it's been really tough to see the transition from when I was in elementary school and we had, fire drills every month, and now my sister's in high school and now they're having active shooter drills. Yep. That transition, it brings so much anxiety, and I think we've done a great job at communicating this is what you do in case of an active shooter. I think we are lacking a little bit in the conversation of this is how you handle your emotions afterwards. This is how you handle your emotions before. This is how you speak to your peers that you see being aloof in the classroom, that you see a little bit distant. And this is how to recognize that before we get to that level. I think that would be a great priority for us to focus on in the upcoming, now with this that's happening in the upcoming times. I think while we're preparing physically and locks and drills and preparing for the actual situation, also emotionally has to be a big part of it.
What neighborhood do you live in?
I live in District 14 here in downtown LA.
In downtown. Where do you go to school?
I go to CSUN, Cal State Northridge.
Go Matadors.
Yes.
How many of you have ever had somebody heard of or directly or indirectly at school threaten violence to peers? How many of you have ever heard that? How many of you ever heard somebody threaten violence with a gun to peers? Okay. Anybody want to share one of those stories?
Well, first I'd like to share my personal story, and then another one as well. Okay. So I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles. My name is Kimberly, representing CD9.
Gotcha.
Yes, so it's South Central area. So I was born and raised in South Central, and gun violence isn't something new to us. We experience it every single day, every morning, every night, during the afternoon. When we're in school, there's someone's getting shot outside. I've seen a couple of people getting shot in front of me, the drive-bys. My dad actually owned a store, a mom and pop shop, and they tried to rob it at night, and I was there with my mom and my brother, and they shot it, and we had to hide in the shower. So I've grew with a lot of trauma, and I've coped with it in like different ways in getting involved in a lot of organizing work, especially mobilizing in my community. So it's been a lot. And hearing these stories, it's really difficult because I see they're actually in school. So not only are they affecting, you know, their parents, but just little kids who are really innocent and don't deserve that. So moreover, in just speaking about my experience, it's been really difficult because I have seen, you know, people who look like me behind the bullet and in front of them. And it's hard because we try to build this solidarity, but we often think about the cure instead of the prevention. And when we think about prevention, we should really think about mental health resources, and especially in schools, and really form connections with the new superintendent, Carvalho. I think would be really important to speak to, because in my community, there's often like one counselor to 700 students. And not only is it for a school counselor, but more on like counseling, let's say for mental health, there's none. A nurse, there's probably a nurse twice a week. What if someone gets injured on a Friday? They're only there on a Monday. It's really hard to just hear these stories, so I'm really thankful that you're here to hear us out. But more specifically, like you shared, someone being threatened by someone new. So as an organizer, I go back to different high schools in South Central. Today, there was actually a threat to Manual Arts High School, also near downtown area, but more like South Central. And a lot of students made a group chat, and they started texting everyone, letting the organizers know, letting other students, saying, don't go to school. Admin got a hold of that message, and they actually shared it with everyone to not attend school. So that was just a recent message saying yesterday. But also, just seeing how this can also be shared in all other schools, maybe other students will also think the same or want to do something this chaotic because of their trauma and because they didn't have the resources they deserve to get, and now they're doing this, the opposite.
Thank you, Kimberly. My grandmother went to Manual Arts. I was with Manual Arts students yesterday at opening a South LA Best Buy and Slauson, Vermont, the Tech Center, which is an amazing tech center, and so the chorus there was singing, and we were talking about some of those issues. So if I hear you, it's both the alert piece as well as the counseling piece to deal with what you're talking about. Okay. Other folks want to build on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Ava Boris from Council District 2.
Hi, Ava.
I'm a current junior at Van Nuys High School, but my freshman year, I remember after school on campus, someone did bring a weapon on, and we went into a full lockdown. It was a really scary experience, and students were not well informed. People who attended school the next day and were not on campus for the event were not notified. No one knew that this had occurred. And I know it brought a lot of anxiety to students who were there. They felt like they weren't listened to, they weren't seen. And this was a weird event that we all thought, oh, it was no big deal. No one got hurt. There wasn't a big event that happened. But earlier this week at Grant High School, there was also an event that happened very similar. And it really shook a lot of the people who were there that freshman day, who were scared and new to high school and didn't really know what was happening. And I think it's really important to not only consider these events that don't end in catastrophe, but also to share and educate. Don't be ashamed of these things that happen. We need to, as a society, step up and figure out how we can support students. And sharing the information isn't shameful. It's important to spread and share and not isolate people. And I think it's really important, especially in these communities, to be able to establish, hey, this is what happened, this is what we're doing about it. You're not alone, you don't have to be scared. And I think creating some sort of support, whether it's recognizing students and checking in on them, just giving a simple, how are you after yesterday? How are you doing tomorrow? I think would be really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Furkan from Council District 11. So I grew up in CD5, and I've lived in CD11 for the past decade. So probably the two council districts that are probably the least affected by gun violence. But, you know, I think something that could be done is this probably falls into the jurisdiction of the city attorney's office, but having the city attorney, you know, file civil litigation against gun manufacturers, I think would be very beneficial to holding them accountable. I know that there's a state bill that's in the process, so maybe having your office and the city attorney's office, you know, hold a joint press conference together to kind of uplift that bill and bring some attention to and put some pressure on the assembly members and senators to kind of help that, you know, go through would be helpful.
Thank you. I know there's been from the city attorney, there's actually been a number of attempts to try to hold liable, but hopefully with a state law that's stronger, we'll have a better chance in the courts for that, in the same way that we changed that with cigarette companies and as people are trying to do with fossil fuel companies now too. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Other folks, yeah, please.
I'm Sasha Prakir from District 5. Going back to the point of emotional trauma, on a broader scale, by coincidence, I was in Buffalo a few days after the shooting there. I was in Sacramento a few days after the shooting there, which was in April, which feels like an eternity ago. And the main thing I got from those was a city in shock. So people you meet are all in shock that this has happened. They can't contemplate it happening again. So I think that giving resources to students who have been affected is very important, but giving resources to this entire city and to like the state and to the people who are constantly affected by this is also very important. And more specifically, I have a question relating to the San Jose, the recent law that they are about to pass relating to requiring insurance liability for guns. Is something like that possible or being considered in Los Angeles?
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, my dear friend who's the mayor of San Jose, Sam Liccardo, has been a big leader on that, to say that if you have a gun inside city limits, you must have insurance. And remember, for those of you who might have followed the youth-led campaign here, remember there were ads that said, do you have a gun, do you have insurance? Or for shooting insurance, like to try to really awaken people. It wasn't a proposal, it was more like awaken people to the violence that's all around us and like how crazy it would be to have insurance for the violence that we have to seek. I do believe there are a couple council members who are looking at that closely. As you know, they would have to initiate in the council offices, and I've said to them, be 100% supportive of that. I think it's a great thing for you all to research, consider, try to find who would be the sponsor. I know Councilmember Krikorian's been a big sponsor of gun violence laws, Councilmember Kretz, but there wouldn't be, I don't think a single council member that wouldn't be interested. But I think it's a really good project for the Youth Council to take on and to possibly see, can we take this and bring it down to Los Angeles and require that. You could also, I think, work closely with the city attorney's office on some of the legal analysis around that, because San Jose kind of stepped out and said, let's just do this. A lot of people are saying, oh, it's never going to hold up in a court of law, but why not push the issue and why not see if not? Yeah, did you have your hand up? Oh yeah, okay, sorry. It's just yeah.
Yeah, Luke Cialanella, I'm from District 11. I think that, just more generally speaking, a lot of the language you use with regards to prevention, it often includes preparing students with drills, preparing faculty with drills, like speaking about schools in general. But I feel like if we focus on that too much, we're often neglecting the fact that even if students and teachers and faculty had all the preparation in the world, that's not going to prevent someone from deciding to perpetrate a mass shooting. That's not going to prevent any of that from happening. My mother is an itinerant social worker for LAUSD, so I hear a lot about the stories from there about teenagers and even children having access to guns and weapons. And I feel like, this may have been said a million times before, but increasing those restrictions on minors getting a hold of those weapons. And I mean, it's easy to say that, but at the end of the day, even if an adult were to purchase a weapon, there's no guarantee that that's going to only stay with that adult or if they're safe enough to carry it. So a lot of those more enhanced gun control regulations are very important, especially with regards to children.
Yeah. Well, it was upon those sorts of suggestions a few years ago that the city did pass, now you have to have lock and safe storage, that I inspired and Youth Council supported, and it was one of the successfully passed laws now at the state level, too, where that has to exist. There's always questions about how do you enforce that, knocking down everybody's door and infringing upon their civil liberties. But certainly when we know the cases that have happened, there's been action taken against parents, because so often in the mass shootings that we see too, but even the one-off shootings, it is a youth who has access to his or her parents' weapons as well. So any other further ideas beyond the law that we passed, I think we'd all be very open to. But it's a great point.
I just want to piggyback that, right? I talked to like several friends of mine and teachers of mine today. Like one of my teachers, my English teacher, Mr. Johnson, I talked to him, I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And he said, how come we as America look at the age of 21 as mature enough to drink, but the age of 18 mature enough to buy a gun? Yep. Yep. And and then I also talked to like my friends, my friend Christina Torres. She did like a whole gun violence protest. I think she had like multiple organizations and all that stuff. And she was also talking about how when we look at other countries and other even third world countries, it's a lot harder to get hands on a gun, and it's a lot less likely for there to be mass shootings in those other countries, even when they do have those guns. And like we were talking about how like it ties into race and class, and how like a lot of other countries are nicer and they're just more willing to help each other out when it comes to like needing help and stuff, and how like it's just like it comes down to how we treat each other, and a lot of that has to do with the color of our skin, and like the indications that people get when there is mass shootings. Like it honestly has to do with race. Like when you see like a black or Latino or any type of person of color who's done a mass shooting, or was the person who did the mass shooting in general, they're always just criminalized immediately. There's no like mental health issues. There's no bullying. There was no there's no background behind it. I mean, unless you count this recent one with Uvalde, Texas. But that's just one. When you look at all the other ones, there was a bunch of white people who had mental health issues. They weren't shot down immediately. They're still alive today. They all have some type of background. They were bullied. They're just like, they were struggling with mental health. Like, there was a bunch of excuses provided to those white people instead of the black people or the Latino people or the Indian people. And yeah, I just think it comes down to race and class, and why are we able to get a gun at 18 instead of 21 when you can drink at 21 but you can't drink at 18?
I'm Lalita Diaram. I'm from District 3. And I just want to say that I have to go on the metro every day to go to school. My school is about 18 miles away from where I live. And a couple months ago on the news, it said that someone had actually shot into one of the metro buses, and it wasn't the bus that I take, but it was the bus that my friend took, and he was actually he took the bus exactly 15 minutes before that happened, and it was a huge shock for us and for all the other students who took the metro buses. And even though it wasn't really in a school, like, gun violence is an issue literally everywhere, and just the feeling of our safety being compromised is a lot to handle. And I think my mom ended up driving me to school for weeks after that because we couldn't trust that the buses were safe anymore. And so part of actually providing public transportation should be that the buses are safe and that people aren't coming on and shooting things up. So yeah, I wanted to say that. And another thing is, even at my school about a month ago, there were threats of gun violence. And our school administrators said that they looked into it, but the threats had no credibility. And we didn't know really like what they investigated even, or where did this come from. And there was so much speculation and there's little accuracy to any statements. All of the official statements made were very vague. So I did want to affirm Ava that within schools, whenever there is even a threat, we never know. It's kept under wraps, and it might be to preserve the school's reputation, but in reality, it just takes away our confidence in our leadership.
I know those are always so immensely complicated. I mean, I used to be a teacher, and sometimes it's, if you find nothing to say the names of the students who were looked at, maybe they were just having a mental health issue and it had nothing to do with violence, but it got, somebody said, well, I think I heard that they were going to shoot up the school or whatever it is. It can be very complicated to safeguard people's identities and protection and to work with them. But I think that is a really good takeaway that both of you have said about how can we even communicate that? Like, we're not going to say any names, whatever. We want you to know this was thoroughly looked at. We know we need more counseling. We need more mental health here, but you're safe in terms of any credible threat like right now. That would be probably much more reassuring than the rumors that circulate in schools very quickly and never get resolved. So I think that's a very good takeaway. I wanted to ask you a question based on what you said, because I rode the bus every single day, metro buses, when I was at your age as well. What suggestions do you have for that? Because I serve on Metro board, and I'd love to talk to Metro about that. look, an ongoing discussion, and it's always complicated. I know there's a lot of folks who are saying, what can we do to de-police? But others are saying, well, you talk to a bus driver today, they're always saying, please don't take police away. Like, we feel we're attacked all the time, and we do need some law enforcement. Others are saying, but maybe law enforcement isn't always the best to deal with a homelessness issue, but obviously shooting towards a bus is not necessarily just social work. We need to do things way before so that never happens. But if that's the reality today, what sort of suggestions do you have to help you feel safer on buses that I can take to the Metro Board?
Well, I would definitely agree with having more police officers. I did have one experience in my freshman year of high school, so 2 years ago, where some random people on the Metro bus offered me and my friend for drugs. To give us drugs. And so luckily just at that stop, the next stop, there were police officers there, so we got off, notified them, and those individuals were taken off the bus. I feel like having police officers at every stop, or maybe even on buses occasionally, having that resource there would definitely be helpful. And next, educating that you shouldn't be afraid to talk to a police officer, because perhaps if my friend and I hadn't gotten off and notified someone, then something bad might have happened. So having that confidence would be really important. And something I wanted to add on that is like a greater policy issue is, in order to restore confidence in policemen, especially after like the Black Lives Matter movement and the exposure of all this police brutality, that people lost all of their confidence in the police force. And that's also like one of the motives behind the defund the police movement as well. And while I think the reasons are correct, I feel like the solution to that problem is a lot different. I know that currently a lot of police officers do not go to college or any professional like university training to become a police officer. Instead, it's a 2-year kind of certification program. I feel like we should adopt a system similar to Canada. I know that Canada has this, where they have police university. And by having a more formalized training for policemen and more systemic training, that we can standardize how policemen are and have a more equitable system in that sense. And that would restore a lot of confidence, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you. We graduated our newest class of police officers today. I was at that graduation. We also laid to rest a police officer who, in a training exercise, in a freak accident last week, hit his head and died. Was an organ donor, so a few people lived because of it, but we transported his body from the hospital to the coroner's office today. It was a very sober reminder. It was very interesting. I always go to each graduation and I do the inspection of the police officers and talk to them about what my expectations of them are. We had a police officer who was born in Guatemala. We had one that was from Nigeria. We had as exotic places as Chicago, and also a lot of locals. It was about a third women in the department's only 20%. We're trying to get to 50-50. It was about 3/4, well, actually 80% people of color, maybe 85%. It was over half Latino. It was about 20% African American, double the represented population. There was South Asian, East Asian. It was an impressive group of young, dedicated people at a very difficult moment to say, I'm going to become a police officer. But absolutely, and many of them, had 4-year degrees, some of them master's degrees, but you're right, it's not across the board there. And very, very good suggestions, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Hello, I am Jules Davis from Council District 6, and I've noticed that we've kind of moved away from telling personal stories, and we're talking about some preventative measures that we think will work. So, in my mind, the Uvalde shooting pointed out 3 major issues in this country, which are gun violence, the justice system, and the mental health care system. And I think that when people say defund the police, there's a lot more meaning behind that. So, like reallocating funds to make sure they're spent on training the officers more or sent to mental health care so that this can be prevented in the first place. Like if you look at the Uvalde shooting, the police force had 40% of the budget, yet they weren't prepared to act. So clearly there's something wrong with the system, because like, just a lot of the times when we hear about these school shootings, we hear the good guys with the guns argument, but then specifically with Uvalde and just in general with a lot of them, the good guys with the guns are there, but they don't know or aren't willing to do their jobs. And so that's just something that I wanted to bring to attention.
Look, that was one we saw with Uvalde. I mean, it was a tactical decision that was that may have resulted in a lot more lives lost. And you know, the training has evolved over the years, for right or for wrong, in these situations, and it was not utilized there, which is to go in, even if that means you draw fire. That didn't happen in this one, but when we had, for instance, the shooting right after I became mayor, you were probably finishing up elementary school. We had a shooting at LAX, and the training that went in was immediately to rush in, and they did, and they stopped this person before more lives could have been lost. You know, one of the things I always say is we shouldn't just get fixated on budget numbers. They're very important. One of the things I'd encourage you as our city's youth council is to also look at what you brought up: education, training, technology. The city, for instance, we were the first city to have body cameras. Now, you all have grown up and you take that for granted. And so we can see that, hold accountable, good and bad, what happens, because nobody can say, well, this is my story. And then it used to be for decades, there'd be stories in court, you'd believe a police officer, not believe a police officer, believe a witness, not believe a witness, a victim of crime, a perpetrator of crime. Implicit bias training, which is something that every police officer now goes through, so that they have to learn the bias that they might carry, as we all do. Everybody around this table has bias. Every police officer has bias. It's something that if we don't go through a formal training, we don't even unpack the ways we don't know that we have bias, sometimes even against ourselves. De-escalation training as well. And one of the things, too, that I would be curious to hear from you all, too, when it comes to gun violence, is the alternatives to just looking at the, you know, if we get to the point where we're just talking about tactics of what police officers can do to stop a shooting, we've obviously failed, and you brought this up, the different systems that are involved. And you brought this up now with the lack of counselors. When we had the strike a few years ago of teachers that many of you witnessed, and I was very involved in resolving, one of the commitments we got from the school district was to hire more counselors, because it was about 1,000 to 1 student ratio. And as you mentioned, those counselors are sometimes just college counselors and not mental health counselors don't all do the same thing. You need college counselors and career counselors, and when you look at that, it's cheaper. You could double the number of counselors in schools, reduce those ratios in half for a lot less than hiring an extra teacher for every other classroom. I mean, just the numbers of counselors are so small and as you said too, you know, the nurses, you know, young people don't decide when they're going to get injured, and it's luck whether or not there's a nurse there. I mean, that's a terrible, you carry that physical trauma with you as well. So one of the things I'd be curious to hear too is how can we as a group, and the city, who with the schools obviously doesn't have direct power, but we do have a new youth development department. We do have the GRID program, which is the Gang Reduction Youth Development Program, which we've expanded by 50% since I've been mayor. The police department hasn't expanded by 50%, but we've been able to expand that by 50%. We have new mental health 911 vans. It's only in two of the 5 bureaus of the city right now, but in the central part of the city, in the west side, 911 calls now for mental health crises will be diverted to clinicians, not to firefighters or police officers who, you know, usually, if we got lucky, would be able to transport them to a hospital, no mental health care at a hospital, re-released on the street. That's not necessarily young people, but you witness violence that isn't just young people committing violence against young people. You witness also older adults doing that. So what are some of the things that we could advocate, whether it's in our budget, whether it's at the state level, on that mental health care system piece that you think is missing?
Hi, my name is Zaid Diaz. I represent Council District 2. And just to bounce off of what my colleagues have already said, I think the things, when we're talking about mental health and gun regulation, and I think those things go hand in hand. You can't, if we're trying to reduce gun violence, we can't just focus on one solution. We have to do both. I read that historically, not just California or Los Angeles, but like the whole country as a whole has just, mental health services have largely been either underfunded, just cut entirely, just the resources have been declining little by little. And now we rarely see like mental health facilities. And so I think think bringing those back and just investing more in mental health as well as gun regulation simultaneously, I think is a huge resource. One of the things we could possibly even implement is, as part of, if you want to obtain a gun, or you should go through not only a training on how to use it, but also like an evaluation by a doctor, just to make sure that you're mentally fit to actually carry a gun. Plus, I think that coupled with a training on how to actually use a gun, whether it be the police department training the person or someone else that's experienced, I think those things would be possible solutions to reduce the amount of gun violence.
Yeah. As we hear so often, we don't let you drive a car without many of those things, and yet we'll literally give you a gun, and good luck with that as well. Those are great suggestions, Aid. Thank you. One challenge, and I'll call on both of you, one of the things with mental health is we don't have many mental health workers. The County of Los Angeles, so we don't have a mental health department in the city. That's something the county does for the city of LA and the other 87 cities of the county. They have $1 billion of excess money that they've not been able to spend, and they have hundreds of positions they've not been able to fill. So one of the challenges I'd like to put out to you too is, how do we recruit more people? We found this out with childcare workers recently. And one of the things we're doing is we're hiring young people, and the city's paying them in the summertime to be childcare workers and maybe teachers, so that we can see that shortage in teachers and that shortage. Even when we fund these things, it doesn't mean people get hired. Because if you don't have enough people who are trained or willing to do these things, we can't fill those positions. So we need mental health care professionals, especially if we are going to move towards something where it's not just a police reaction, but a mental health care professional to change those resources and where we put them. So one of the things I'd love to see a younger generation deal with is, how can you recruit your peers? It doesn't mean you all have to individually, though I hope some of you would, but find more people saying, this is a great career. And the way we recruit for firefighters, the way we recruit for accountants, the way we recruit for all those other things, to tell people this is some of the most important work, from homelessness to gun violence, to have more people working on mental health, because just because it's been defunded over those years doesn't mean that we have enough people lined up to do it too. So.
In addition to like what Zaid was saying, not only is it a one-time mental health evaluation, but it's a yearly thing that they have to go through, because like, mental health can change within like a month, within a day, within, X amount of time. And I also kind of like wanted to add on to that with like, that whole like holding gun manufacturers accountable, but also holding these therapists or like doctors also accountable, because it's like, if they have that heightened responsibility, then they are way more cautious about like who they say like, yes, they are suitable to like own a gun.
Thank you, Monica. That's great. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. To speak a bit more generally about mental health care workers in the city and the state, I've done a lot of research on deinstitutionalization, which we saw a lot of under Governor Reagan's tenure, so sort of the shutting down of a lot of or basically all of the mental institutions in the state of California in the 1960s and 70s, and as a result, there has been significantly less care for mentally ill populations in the state and the city, of course. Something I think might be a good idea is, as Monica was discussing, like incentivizing education and incentivizing joining the workforce. And I think I've seen a lot of similar things done with the Peace Corps and other programs, and sort of perhaps grants or paying for people's educations to learn more or gain a master's degree or something like that in a field of public administration or social work or psychology, something in that field to then work directly with those populations in need, be it homeless populations or relating more to gun violence and violence in general.
It's a great suggestion. Maybe an LA Mental Health Corps. We've seen the state fund a number of different programs of Youth Corps that we're called on to do it. So we're doing this with teachers, we're doing this with environmental workers, racial justice, immigration, like a few different categories. This would be really interesting to approach the county, again, because the county is the experts on this, but maybe this youth council could pitch that to a supervisor or two and see if they'd be interested. We get new voice speakers now.
So my name is Victoria and I live in Oklahoma, representing Council District 7. And I want to go back to the point about like that school to career pipeline, especially for mental health workers, and also the lack of mental health workers. And so I know that LA Trust is working on like kind of writing up this policy for peer-to-peer programs in high school, specifically around mental health. The LA Trust, yeah. Specifically around mental health and kind of providing high school students with the preparation for how to handle mental health situations with, lower classmen in high school. And so I think by preparing these students at a young age, it also gives them like that option to go into mental health fields right out of high school, and also incentivizing that as well. So that's something they can put on the resumes, and really just, pushing for that school to, mental health career pipeline.
Instead of reinventing this, maybe we can connect with them and talk about this idea of a core or something like that, and putting that out. That's wonderful. That's great.
Hi, my name is Stephen Bash. I was one of the members on both the first and second cohorts of the Mayor's Youth Council to End Gun Violence. I find it really interesting that a lot of us have, I haven't spoken yet obviously, but that a lot of us have brought up mental health as a main driving factor in this gun violence discussion. And I'm wondering, as I think about it over the years, why are we diverting to mental health? Why are we not focusing on the guns themselves? Of course, we care about us as individuals. We want to make sure everyone's mental health is taken care of. That is important, and a lot of these mass shootings, even smaller incidents, do revolve around mental health issues. But why are we always diverting the attention away from the issue of gun violence itself? Because guns are the ones that, even if the person is using the gun, the person grabs the gun, and that is the weapon of attack. And I like how, I think it was you that mentioned a sort of certification program like you would get for driving a car. I remember when I was learning to drive, one of the first things in that online training course was a car is a weapon, you need to use it responsibly. So as a society, a lot of people aren't using these guns responsibly. So why do we keep diverting away from the issue of guns themselves?
So you guys familiar with the 1 and 2 finger? So sometimes if you have somebody has a response to that, hold up one finger. If it's still if something else, it's 2. So that oftentimes when we have discussions, somebody will ask a question, and then it just moves on to whatever the person had on their mind. So are there any ones on that before we move on? Okay.
My name is Michael Lopez. I'm representing District 7. I actually work for GRID. So on your question there, I think the reason we are focusing on mental health, like that's what feels tangible to us, is because there's been several conversations about gun control already. It's been a conversation that's been going on for decades, and nothing feels like it's going to be done. I feel primarily because of lobbying, and it's a big industry that's kind of hard to tackle. What feels like we can tackle on ourselves, like at a personal, smaller level, feels like mental health. That's my personal opinion. That's like what I feel can be changed without having to lobby for someone else. But we were also mentioning, like, what can we do to incentivize workers to actually join mental health professions, stuff like that. I mean, you mentioned that the GRID department has been expanded by at least 50%. And it has. It's an incredible organization. But working with GRID, I've noticed that our day-to-day topics, like it's a work that we like to do. It's a passion. We like working with kids. We like working with youth. But it's not feasible for us long time. Like we joined the mental health profession, we joined social work because we want to make a difference in our communities and what we see. But long term, we're also suffering on like how we can pay our bills, how we can do that. So it's not a profession that a lot of people jump to because unfortunately we can't really pay our bills with it. So people divert from it. What I feel like can be done is more funding towards those programs so that actual workers would actually want to join it. We expand our workforce, we expand the amount of people who can actually provide the service, and hence more people can get that, what they actually need in the community.
So thank you for bringing that up. It's such a critical point. I've actually brought this up at the White House, and for the first time, this is the first administration looking at what we can do, and we've got a great ally in this, who's working with Los Angeles and Newark and the first national organization for interventionists to say, what can we do to professionalize this? Because usually it was like, oh, well, community group with some folks who might or might not have been in gangs and who have lived this life and have lived experience, like, are just these heroes, but they're not paid like heroes. There's no, you can do it for 20 years and never get a raise. And so, part of what we put in the budget wasn't just the 50% expansion of the territory, but now for the first time, money without having a requirement of hiring anybody new, so that people could get raises, maybe benefits, because they're not city workers, they're city contracted workers. And I think long-term, we should be looking at making it, just as we recruit somebody to be a firefighter or police officer, we should be recruiting them to be a gang interventionist worker with the same benefits, with the same sort of, incentives, et cetera. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that's another thing that we could take on to make sure that this gets embedded. It's been a decade that we've had GRID, and that's great. Yeah, I worked on it as a council member, inherited it from Mayor Villaraigosa. We've got an election this year, and whoever wins better keep that going and expanding. But the next step is not just expanding, it's professionalizing and maybe even bringing into the city family. So these are city workers with, not just city contractors, but city workers to be able to do that. So appreciate that. Yeah. We go you first, and then I'll come back around.
I'm Daniela Sestich. I'm from CD15. I just want to bounce off what both of you touched on. I totally agree with what you were saying, how a lot of times we divert from the concept of guns to mental health, and I totally agree with what you're saying about how that's also very important. I think it's a collaboration of the two for sure. I'm sure we can all agree on that. I just think of things like there are certain susceptible groups from a younger age when it comes to mental, that comes from gun violence and not necessarily the mental health aspect, where certain groups of our population are exposed to it from much younger, more susceptible to it. And I'm sure we all grew up with the DARE program and things like that for drugs, because there are certain groups that are susceptible to it from a young age. And when we talk about the mental health, it's usually focused around this idea of these mass shootings and these people that have deeper underlying psychological issues, and then we completely transcend the idea of a huge portion of gun violence is suicides, and we completely transcend that aspect of the mental health issues. And so I think that the mental health issues do come in oftentimes at older ages. A lot of these mass shootings, we're not seeing young children walk into the schools, we're not seeing as young of children typically that are committing suicide. But we are still seeing very young children, enter the world of gun violence, enter into learning how to use guns at a young age within our own city. And we're pretty fortunate compared to other large cities across the country to have not the same statistics, but I still think it's an issue for us to address. And I think that I would love to see something for younger kids, we had DARE, why don't we also have gun violence prevention, or even we can incorporate mental health to that too. I think exposure at a young age can be very key to prevention.
I think we've had two that haven't spoken for the first time. I want to just open up to allow either of you if you want to say anything, or if you're good passing, just listening right now. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of echo about. My name is Abigail Lamb from Council District 12. I kind of want to echo on emotional support, especially from students. I'm a high schooler at Van Nuys High School, and I feel like a lot of our youth is kind of coping with the fear of gun violence with comedy, so it's oftentimes disregarded or put up with jokes, and it mainly stems from us being so desensitized from it, because we've grown up with almost every month there's another mass shooting at a school. And recently I've had a friend come up to me, and we're very close, and she kind of expressed how she was extremely scared after the shooting in Texas, but she didn't know how to deal with it emotionally and fully seriously talk about it to a counselor at our school or to a counselor professionally. And many times when she does try to express her fears to her peers, many of them just joke about it and brush it off. So I kind of want to echo that emotional support for students are extremely important.
Thank you.
Sam, I want to piggyback what Abigail said. No worries. I'm Nadalyn. I'm from District 1. So when I was in high school at Monroe High School, in my health class, there's these people, I think they came from a clinic, and they were advocating more for peers as their counselors, because peers can understand each other a lot more than an adult, than someone who's then an adult that's a peer can understand more of the peers than an adult can understand a peer, the youth and stuff like that. So I do think that should be more prioritized in how we can recruit. We should recruit more younger people as counselors, but also have counselors as well, because that is important, since we are youth and we don't want to also carry a trauma of our peers, but we do also want to help them out. But so I think what Monica was saying, they're having a pipeline. I think I really like that idea, because peers do really understand their own peers, and I think we should also emphasize that a lot more.
background.
So I just wanted to piggyback off everyone right now. So with the whole mental health issue thing, I think one approach could also be maybe training teachers in some of the aspect of how to deal with students who do have mental health issues. Because I know personally, we don't think we really speak about this much, but some kids, like I personally didn't want to be seen talking to a therapist because it can be seen as like poorly in the image. And I didn't recently until like because of like some things that happened in my life with like earlier how you said like how people with mental health issues or drug addictions, like I have someone in my family who has the same issue, and she's just able to do something. Like she got high off computer cleaner one time. We had to chase her around the city, and we were barely able to get police to help her. And so we had to chase her around, and then they put her into the mental health system. But then people already know how to get out of it, and so they're like, oh, I know you can't hold me here. They get out the next day, and they can do the same thing over and over again. And I feel like if we could somewhat train teachers, because I have several teachers who I'm feel perfectly fine talking to with about my mental health, who I already have, and they've helped me sometimes, but they can't help me all the time. And so I feel like if we can train them, because teachers already have a good connections with certain students, deeper than some parents, deeper than for some friends. Like there are only certain things you can talk to teachers about compared to your friends, because you don't want your friends to look at you weird, or you don't want your mom to look at you weird. So I think that could help out a lot.
Don't worry, moms look at us weird all the time. That's what they're supposed to do. I hear you.
Yeah, I feel like teachers, I talked to my teacher about mental health today because my grades were coming in, and I was just like, hey, I need help, talk to this teacher. She gave me a bar, and she told me she'll talk to her for me, and that helped a lot. And so maybe we can reach out to teachers a little bit, and also working on the pipeline, like they said, we see it for the Army, we see it for the Navy, we see all these scholarships, free college, there's this many passing this, and then, there's all these programs. They come to our school, they show off, they have policemen and firemen that pull up, and I feel like if we had social workers come do that somewhat, put out events for them, offer some scholarship for them, put programs, maybe put a class in where their final project is to do a mental health check on the peer. And then one last thing is with GRID, I work personally with GRID with the Communities Warrior for Peace Again, and I know several of them who they've been in there for a while, like Claudia Vale. She works with our neighborhood council in Rampart Village. This one guy named Will, and they've been in it for a long time, but they have a really poor office. Their office is one building, and it's super small on the second story. Why don't they have a bigger office? Things like, why don't they have more resources to help give out? I mean, obviously they have money, but they don't have the people to help them, and they've had to reach out to my mom's organization or to our neighborhood council to help them out. And they do stuff like food distributions. They do. They've done work with the youth with the intervention, because I think people don't really know the difference between prevention and intervention. Intervention is when you're working with the people who are already in the gangs or in the system, and so I feel like we also need to focus a great amount on intervention as well, because a bunch of the students and people of color, we have friends who are probably already gang related. My uncle was almost introduced to a gang right there in Mid-City, because he's a big guy, big person of color. People thought he was gang related, but he wasn't. And I just know I know a good amount of people who are somewhat gang related or have family members who are gang related. And I feel like if we help them out and show them the other opportunities, and we give more, we give maybe a department to a GRID, or a bigger office, is bigger staff members, people to help them out and help reach out, because they obviously can't do it all on their own. I see they already have their hands tied. They can only be so many places at so many times. And I feel like if we give them more people, maybe some more staff, maybe a bigger office, or just those small things, it can help out a lot into reaching the people around them.
Thank you. I said you next, but I think it's first time here.
Yeah. So I'm Nirvan Rayamaji. I'm from CD12. So what I'm thinking, I'm just listening to everyone here, because I guess I'm one of the younger ones here, because everyone here is upwards of 18, so I was just oh.
It's all good, we're all good.
But I'm hearing everything's just trying to happen at a large scale, right? Everything's just attacking at the city level, national level, international level, right? And what I'm thinking is maybe that we can start from even a local level, right? Even, a lot of these school clubs and things like that are community service orientated, and they think local, act global. Yeah. But I think it's important that we kind of attack this problem in the same way, where students can actually make their own clubs or create safe spaces where we can actually express our mental health. Just like Abigail said, sometimes it's scoffed off, or you know, sometimes we just make jokes about it, but having an actual safe place where it can be peer-to-peer, not just like a kid to a therapist. I think it's important that we all kind of have a place where we can talk about it. Yeah.
That's great. That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to say thank you both for sharing. I think it's really important to just appreciate both comments because they're really important to address. So my siblings, I have two, one in 5th grade, one in 4th grade. They recently got accepted to grid, and I've been seeing their transformation, and they get so excited after school to simply go because of the activities, meeting other students from different schools, and probably going to a Dodgers game or going to bowl or going to a karaoke night. And that excitement just starts from like elementary, elevates to middle school, high school, and so on. And they're so inspired by the mentors they've had growing up in their childhood that they want to do the same. And that's when you can really push for a career, like you said, in mental health. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but back to what I was saying of just having counselors, really focusing on equity instead of equality. When you think of equity, really serving the highest schools, the highest needs of the schools. So if you, let's say, for example, if we really want to be strategic and what we want to do in uplifting that department or those services to go to those schools, actually make a mental health program, incentivize, like Monica said, the students, get them to join the program. Let's say 6-week fellowship. They understand the curriculum, then they get to peer and like get with peers, organize them. You know, like someone else and everyone else has mentioned peer-to-peer counseling, and then from then, and then from then, like, you know, higher education. Then it's easy for them because they've had that experience, and then we have that, you know, that career, that department with them. And I'm an organizer at Community Coalition. It's a nonprofit in South Los Angeles. We created you can say community-wide assessment with LMU. Oh, you're a fan of Coco?
I said, who founded Coco?
Oh, Karen Bash is running for mayor.
that was a softball.
We can continue this. Yeah, so
Just asking.
Karen Bass founded an organization based off like the root causes. So that assessment we did was with Dr. Cheryl Grills from Loyola Marymount University. And I think we're forgetting to mention the pandemic. It's been over 2 years, and the mental health that existed before just increased over, and how even destroyed we are, and just staying home, how we have to socialize right now. It's really important to just state that. And like I'm saying, I'm thankful for with that, taking into account that there's parents, there was like a 40% increase of mothers who have to stay home. They often are involved, if you're talking about people of color, like mothers of color, they clean houses, they do, you know, other field work and something. They can have the opportunity to actually be counselors because it's been so, you can say like bad and taboo to speak on therapy and all that, but they can also get access to this, have some Spanish counseling, and it'll really elevate the community as a whole, and possibly even influence other students like the ones in grid and so on, to, you know, get other departments and then keep it going for just like a milestone to happen in the future, and we see less of the statistics.
Well, we're working our way down. I want to bring up what Stephen brought up for a second, because I think it's a point that is fair to lift up. And it's a fair response you had too, which is like, well, because we all feel it, right? I've been working since I was your age on trying to get, and we did have an assault weapons ban passed when I was about your age, and we thought that would like stay in place. So it isn't completely hopeless. We've had times, but you're right, it takes a lot of determination, and the national level takes a long time. And in the meantime, you're like, I need something tomorrow, and I want something next week, and I want something next month. So it's not an either or, but I also want to make sure this group, because this has been a group that's been powerful in going to Sacramento, being able to lobby. Washington's pretty broken right now, so I think I'd agree with your analysis, but it's also not a reason not to stay consistent with trying to call on national leadership around this. But California can do quite a bit on its own, and can challenge the courts, whether it's through a lawsuit or whether it's whatever, can challenge national issues by passing laws sometimes. So I also, as I know with 2 hands up here, and then I'll come back around, I just want to plant that out there because I don't want it to be dismissed. I think you bring up a good point. I know you weren't dismissing it. We can do both, but this can be a powerful group to really say, okay, here are other laws. California and Los Angeles are far ahead of other places. There's some things we are handcuffed on, like maybe we can push down or push up the age, even though we had a court case here that said that throughout the state law, that push down our age to 18?
We actually are partnering with 2 organizations. If you don't mind, I'll say their names. They're called Bring Change to Mind, and the other is Our Minds Matter. And those 2 organizations have really provided us with resources, with slideshows and stuff to educate our members. And our main goal in the club is to erase the stigma around mental health. So I think one of the biggest issues is when people aren't feeling too good and they're recognizing that their feelings are problematic, right? They're afraid to go and see a professional because of the stigma that they will be labeled as a mentally ill person, and that really carries a negative connotation, so no one wants to do that. And the next thing is, once you actually apply to go to therapy, there are so many issues that people face. For example, I've walked through the process many times with other people, with myself, and actually one of the main barriers is financial. So therapists actually out of pocket can take copays of up to even $300 per hour or per session for some therapists. And the average is around $80 to $100. And for many people, this price is out of reach, especially if it's a student. Most students are not working, they don't have any wages, and their parents cannot afford to send them to therapy. So that's one of the things. The next thing is our nation is currently facing a shortage of counselors and therapists and psychiatric social workers. This is a national problem. There are not enough people going into mental health care that the people need. And that means that there are up to year-long waiting lists for people to actually get a therapist. And if someone is having suicidal thoughts right now, getting a therapist in a year is not going to help. They need it right now. So yeah, that's another issue. And the final thing is, I have had a couple friends who were taken into the mental health care system at our school because they were having suicidal thoughts. And the system, in my opinion, was horrendous. It was awful. What happened is one of our friends actually reported them for being suicidal. They were taken into the counselor's office, given a quiz to take to see if they were actually suicidal or not. And one of them, who was identified as such, they took her in an ambulance, sirens on and everything, took her to the ER, where she stayed for many hours. She was panicking, of course. She came from an immigrant family. And so her parents were very strict, and they did not really believe in mental health. So then having the bomb dropped that, hey, your daughter is currently in the ER for being suicidal, like how does that feel to a parent who doesn't even believe suicide is a thing or depression is a thing, right? So all of this just made her stress even worse, and it just exacerbated all of the problems. It didn't make anything better. And she ended up, even to this day, does not have therapy. And I feel like the way that situation could have been handled, it could have been private. It could have been just her and a counselor, talk face to face, maybe have a couple more meetings, right? Because it wasn't like it was an immediate emergency. She was just identified as a person with depressed feelings. We all have them, and it's completely okay to have. That doesn't warrant such an extreme reaction by legality, by our healthcare system. And it just made a lot of things worse. And I feel like that is a very easy thing to solve. Identifying what situation is urgent and what is not urgent can solve a lot of problems and save a lot of trouble on everyone's part.
Thank you. Here, and then I'll swing back around.
Yes, I go to CSULA, so the problem with a lack of counselors is definitely not just at the school level, it's in the college level too. You have a mental health crisis in February and they say, call back in April and see about it. So it's definitely about hiring more counselors, and it's also about breaking the stigma that students have, both in higher education and in lower education, about seeing counselors. And that can be done when adults are talking to kids and saying, therapy is cool. You know, that sounds like it's talking down to them. them, they won't be receptive to that. But if we and people like us are able to talk to our peers and encourage access to mental health resources, that'll be pretty successful in breaking these stigmas. Going into something a little more specific, on the other side of mental health is, I know we have these famous red flag laws where if someone is deemed to be a threat to themselves or others, we can either temporarily suspend our gun access, or we can review it every few periods and see. But maybe expanding that to see if someone in your household has maybe mental health issues, or maybe if someone in your household would be banned from having a gun under a red flag law, maybe your access to a gun should be more strictly scrutinized, because like we were saying, parents of children who have suicidal thoughts or tendencies towards violence against others, they might not take precautions to prevent their kids from accessing the guns. So looking at someone's household is also going to be very important in access to a gun, and making sure that mental health issues are not going to change ownership of that gun.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great suggestion. I come back here and then I'll do time check. How much time do we have? Okay, I'm going to take these 3 comments and then I'm going to try to summarize some of what I've heard. Okay.
I think it's really important. The education pipeline that everyone's been speaking of is so very important. But I also think when students specifically living in this time, there's kind of a push to look into mental health careers. And I think fostering and kind of supporting students on that path is really important. But mental health professionals are so important that I think the compensation for their work needs to be there. The fact that we can recognize their importance in youth, in the city as a whole, is so great, but they're not being adequately compensated for that. We live in an expensive city, and I know a lot of my friends and peers, when researching what to do, it shouldn't be, but they look at what they can make a year. They look at how they can live and they can support their families. And so for such a valuable job, I think creating this space where it's like they should be paid accurately, they should be paid what they deserve. And I think when we're looking, there's 2 ways. There's the private kind of doctors and professionals who can have these long waiting lists, and then we have people who want to make change in their communities and they want to work in schools. And making sure that those people know you can live off of this salary, you can live and support and create this change and do what you're passionate about and still be able to sustain yourself. And I think creating that education program, financing people so they can go to school for what they care about, but also know that they can make enough money to live and do the change they want and not fall into, here's a year-long waiting list for my services.
Thank you.
I want to piggyback off of Ava because she spoke about a lot of what I wanted to say. I'm sure you heard of it, but Teach for America, they have a program similar where they train newly graduated college students to become teachers in a 2-year span, and then they become teachers and work at the schools that need it the most. So the program matches them to schools that have a lack of teachers or need more teachers. And so I think a structure similar to that, as well as pushing for compensation, would be a really good formula to be pushing for more mental health providers in our schools. Also, I want to elevate, I think it's also important to already elevate student-led organizations or youth-led organizations like Invest in Youth Coalition, which is why we're all here today. They have sessions with youth that works to destigmatize mental health already. So if we try to elevate their mission and their priorities, I think that would help a lot of the youth and the people in Los Angeles City.
Okay, and then I think we have one more sheet.
Ooh, pressure.
You don't have to summarize it all. I'll do that. I'll just whatever you want.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to swing it back around because I truly do think Mental Health Mondays is one of a key solution to this, because one of the key points that I included was cultural competence, because basically what we've all been sharing, a lot of us come from immigrant backgrounds that have negative stigmas around mental health, and even to this day, well, she's gonna find out soon, my mom doesn't know that I've been going to therapy because growing up I've heard. Thank you. Yeah, it honestly took a lot because I was always told these people are being dramatic, they're being attention. It took me so long to break out of that and finally start going. And so having that cultural competence background can really help break through that stigmas, both with older generations and newer generations. And with Mental Health Mondays, my plan was to incorporate more therapists in school, which not only alleviates the financial burden, but also creates more accessibility because students are always at school. And then I also wanted to go back to what Stephen was saying was why do we always pivot to mental health? And that is such an important factor, but also liability and accountability. So kind of paralleling what Newsom has done with like holding these like manufacturers accountable, we should also do the same for shops by requiring, you know, serial numbers on like ammunition that traces back to those shops. Also holding family and friends accountable. So like a lot of the school shooters, their parents were aware of what they were going through and even supplied some of these weapons. So if we start holding them accountable, you know, it promotes that whole like we need to get this person help, we need to alert the officials. And also, like I was going back with those doctors who assess these individuals for like, you know, are they mentally stable enough to, you know, have these weapons? And finally, what I think it was Nirvan, what he said about expanding red flags. Something that I wasn't able to find was, you know, we do have a registry, but one thing that we don't have is like some sort of cap or limit on like, you know, how many firearms an individual can like hold. And I think that red flag system should come into play when they're trying to purchase more than like 5, because I honestly don't see why anybody would need more than one, but you know, to each their own. And I feel like with that red flag system, it should force like some sort of like mental health professional or officers to do a wellness check on why do you need more than 5. So I just want to finish off with that. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. Let me say one thing just about the Youth Council in general. My goal is to empower you to be your own force no matter who the next mayor is too, along with advising me till my very last day in office, and to have power with the city council, which is an equal branch of our government every single day, because you can usually start most things just with a city council member who wants to champion that. So know that that's my goal. Working from that, these discussions are really important because we usually daylight everything we're feeling and everything we wish in the world. And then it's also my goal as mayor to, okay, what can we control? And what can we do? You know, what's long-term things that we want to do that we might have some control by joining national campaigns? What are statewide places we can influence? What do we have direct control on? Because this is a city entity. What can we influence the school district to do? Because we don't have any direct power in Los Angeles over the school district, but the mayor will always have a lot of informal power to kind of influence as the, you know, notable elected official around. So just against that, and some of you who are organizers and been trained in organizing, there's also a science to that. I was an organizer as well, of kind of trying to make sure that we figure out what is the information we really want to know that we don't know. How do we do those studies and publicize that? How do we then figure out the targets of who we want to know that information and take action? And then what are the specific actions we want? So also that's, I think, something for you all to have discussions organically amongst yourselves and to come back to leaders like me, the city council and others, and to push. So, but this is what I heard in a few different categories. I heard kind of school, you might have just heard like mental health and laws. I'm going to do it a little differently. I heard a lot of work in the schools area, kind of by target, a lot in the mental health area, including schools, but outside of schools as well. Some work in legislation and regulation, and then some stuff around interventionists. So let me go through with that and tell me if I missed anything. And then what we can do is we can put this together for you, share it with you, and this is yours. It's just putting your words back in your hands, and then you can self-organize around how you want to advocate or what you think you have the resources, time, or where you'll make an impact. And it's not either or, by the way. You don't have to just as a council do it. You can individually take different pieces or whatever. So in the schools, I heard obviously the need to have many more counselors, to have better communication when there's incidents, to have more regular check-ins when there's not incidents, or check-ins when there's incidents that aren't about a school, but in traumatic moments like what we're living through right now, and just checking in with people. Teacher training to widen while we're hiring more counselors, the number of people who would have mental health expertise, and also students to empower peer counselors and to have that training. Then specifically within that too, everything from clubs or kind of mental health Mondays, campaigns, and having student-led organizations that begin to destigmatize mental health care. And it made me think that maybe one of the things we can have is kind of talk about a school package. You know, what's a package that we could take into schools? Say, here's a checklist. You might not be able to do all these, but if you want to know everything you should be thinking about, here's what the Youth Council of the City of Los Angeles suggests that you do to think about assessing your school. We do this with environmental activism all the time. Are we recycling? Like, what are people doing? How many trees do we have planted? All that sort of stuff, but a playbook. And then I would invite you to invite me to see if we can get maybe the school board president and the superintendent, maybe some mix of some teachers, or counselors, some people who are from the union that represents counselors, because that was part of the agreement. They were supposed to hire more, and I don't know what the progress has been. But to have that kind of conversation and to have some very specific asks. Can the school district commit to X? Can we have a school where we can pilot this and show that it's a really successful program? And then that would be something that would help other schools take that on, et cetera. So that's what I heard kind of in the schools area. In mental health, a lot of that had to do with mental health, but also stemming from that, and not specifically only about schools, was the recruitment of and really getting more people ready for careers in. There's certain things we can't directly control, but point extremely well taken about compensation, but maybe the county can. The county could, if you have $1 billion and you don't have enough people, maybe you should raise your salaries, you know. So I agree 100%, but working with LA Trust, or this idea maybe of a mental health corps of young people that we could pay in the summer times maybe to get training, and we could put some of those job training dollars specifically towards this, and a career pathway into that, scholarships, and talking to foundations or even some of our local schools, the 2-year and 4-year institutions, about how can we better get you that, and what capacity do you have for social workers and mental health professionals. I think that peer counseling piece goes into the schools, but it's not just for schools, because youth meet in lots of different places. We have clubs, we have athletic associations, we have all sorts of neighborhood, you know, our grid programs have summer night lights and things like that. What can we do to start doing a peer-to-peer mental health program? And the destigmatization and the cost piece, I think, is a really important one. I just read an article about how a lot of cities and mayors were taking some of the stimulus funds. We've spent all of ours, and it ends June 30th, but that doesn't mean we can't find other funds, and they're putting them into mental health care. And I think mayors do feel that frustration, because usually it's a county that has mental health, and we're called on to respond to, because people know us better than the county commissioner, or in our case, supervisors sometimes. But we don't have any money assigned from any place for it. But that doesn't mean we couldn't, and to kind of start putting that emphasis out there as well. So that's in the kind of larger mental health piece. And sorry, on the destigmatization, we should look at some cultural competent, you know, the way that the gun violence, the youth gun, sorry, what do we call it? It was, thank you. Had a campaign on this. Maybe this is one of the things we're in multiple languages, unlock and really speak to, especially the parent class, about like destigmatizing this in order to save the lives of their own children. In the legislation and regulation area, I heard the gun liability piece, which we could bring up with the city attorney's office and see whether that's something that we could look at, or the city council to sponsor legislation to hold accountable either gun manufacturers or insurance for gun owners. Red flag laws for households, I would say we should look at that. It may be that our Constitution doesn't allow you to take a second person, even if they're a family member, and take away any of what's seen right now as their rights, but let's look at it. And maybe we could push that and see if we could change that. Ammunition serial number is something that's been brought up before in the state, and I think that's worthy of a Sacramento push, or looking at whether or not that can be achieved. It's now done for ammunition buys, so we now know who buys ammunition, which is pretty unique for a state, but we don't have serial numbers on each casing, and that's complicated because of the way bullets work, but could be done. And then the doctor assessments or mental health assessments for gun purchases, huge infrastructure. Don't want to kid you that wouldn't be hugely expensive, but it's worth a try. And if we're at least doing that for driver's licenses, is there something between a full assessment and at least a basic training that we could look at and find a state sponsor, or the number of guns? So those were the pieces I heard on suggestions for legislation, regulation. And then lastly, on the interventionist piece, it was the two things I heard was the professionalizing and providing more resources, whether it's just the overall funding of GRID or the individual funding of workers in the interventionist space. And I think that's one where you can most directly affect me, the city council, and really I would wrap your head around like what is a reasonable ask, because you know, we're not, anything we do in the city takes away from something else. People often say, oh, it'd be really nice, we'll just take it from the police budget, and then somebody says, well, I need them there for the buses. I mean, it always is complicated, right? We all think that there's easy targets to take money from. After 21 years, there's nothing easy to cut. Oh, we'll just reduce library hours by a half hour. Well, you know, we love our libraries and talk to all the librarians, but what would be reasonable to ask for in terms of that as well? And then kind of related, there was a couple suggestions, wasn't so much on gun violence, but also on the professionalizing of policing and some of the suggestions made. So that's what I heard. Is there any specific suggestion real quick, and time is short, so not speeches, but just anything that I missed in the summary that we want to add to that? Okay. Yes?
for time reference, 2018, 2019, so not that long ago, we were thinking that this is a ridiculous idea, and that's why we said this isn't insurance, this is a wake-up call. If we have time, I would love to play the phone call, 1-833-GUNSURE. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yep. So as part of the campaign, we launched 1-833-GUNSURE, and as you'll hear, it's, let's just play it.
Thank you for calling 833-GUNSURE. If this is an emergency, hang up and dial 911. If you're calling for gun violence insurance, listen to the following options. For mass shooting insurance, press 1. For accidental shooting insurance, press 2. For everyday gunfire insurance, press 3. If you think this is ridiculous and want to do something to end gun violence for good, press 4. If you'd like to share your story about gun violence, press 0. To repeat this menu, press the star key.
Okay, so that you get the gist of the idea. It sounds ridiculous, and now I wasn't actually aware that gun violence insurance is now a real thing. Just to think about that, it's shocking.
Well, it's gun ownership insurance was slightly different, but you're right. I mean, this was a brilliant Youth of LA generated campaign. We just empowered with the resources behind it. A lot of people say, don't just convene councils, give them resources, and we did. This was your money to spend. This was the volunteer time of one of our top advertising agencies, and it really was remarkable. And by the way, that doesn't have to lay fallow, even though we suspended some of that. That can be also part of what this group says. Let's recharge that, see if we can raise some dollars around getting those ads back up or getting the donations of our advertising companies to be able to put them back up. We just got a new street furniture contract, which is a fancy way of saying all of our new bus stops are going to come in, and so those companies sometimes give us free ad space and on our own buses, et cetera. So think about that as well. So for next steps, we're going to summarize this and share this with everybody. Make sure that you have that. Like I said, we can suggest to you and dictate, like, okay, well, let's elect somebody in charge, et cetera. But I always believe that should come organically from all of you. You should self-organize and figure out how you want to take this on. Maybe I would just say the one thing, the temptation is always to add everything. Let's do it all, because that way that's the most inclusive. You won't be able to accomplish if you do it all. So really make some hard decisions, even if it's your suggestion. Say, okay, what are the 2 or 3 things we think we can make the most impact now? Let's put these in a waiting area. Let's not dismiss them. Or if we have the capacity to split up and do them separately, do them. But make some of those decisions, then come back to us, and let's circle back. Maybe the school district is a good place to start with some of I think the bulk of things happen there. We've got a new superintendent. It's always great, I say, when there's an election or when somebody's new, it's the best time to get him or her to promise things. So I'm happy to use my power as mayor too. And by the way, in the runoff, maybe it's too late because the election's next week, you should have both the candidates come talk to you and see if we can get like a media sponsor and ask them tough questions about, what would you do as mayor in these areas. Real quick, last comment?
Yeah, it's a real quick one. It's not, I don't know if it's necessarily off topic, but I don't think anyone brought it up. I talked to my friends at school, but some of them brought up the solution of school police, and I wanted to just not necessarily negate that, but say that as a member of BSU and a person who has a lot of family members or just friends who are like people of color or black, specifically because with the school police, they don't have guns, and the most they have, I think, is tasers, right? So
no, they're both, but they're not always have them on campus. But you're right.
Yeah, but for the most part, I've seen them mostly only having tasers, and I don't really see how school police will necessarily be much of a solution because it would only make students inside of school not feel as safe, and I personally not feel safe with school police, and my friends have it too, and I think the BSU movement did a bunch of that to get rid of the school police. So I just wanted to say that school police to me doesn't necessarily seem like a solution, more just like is pushing them out and thinking the school is less of an option to reach out to for help, because school police it doesn't make you necessarily feel safe. It does make you feel safer in certain aspects, but not all aspects. And especially for people of color, we don't need police in extra places that we want to feel safe at, and it's a place that we're always at as well.
I didn't hear that as a suggestion from anybody today, but I appreciate that. So absolutely, thank you. Okay. Well, thank you all. I hope you all have a good weekend. Thank you for your service. By the way, let me tell you, as somebody who's done this for a long time, the more service you give, the tougher it is. And the more you decide to not just say the right things, but start doing work, it inherently involves compromise and criticism. And so when it comes to mental health, I want you to all steel yourselves for that. because it's tough. And it doesn't mean everybody has to become mayor. If you're going to run for mayor, come talk to me, and we'll get you a mental health check before that. But in general, I know that some of you will maybe run for office, some of you will stay involved in organizing. Take care of yourselves and learn how to be kind to each other in our disagreements, to call people in instead of call them out, to really not just go for the social media hit where, look at me, I'm bringing truth to power and I'm so awesome. Like, actually learn how to cross the street, not just protest on the street, which is, I think both have a place, and to come into rooms like this to do that negotiation and to show your peers what leadership can look like, even at our most frustrated times, because I want you to be in this for your lives, your entire lives. And I know a lot of people who do this, young youth leaders who do it for a couple of years, and it's so kind of painful because you don't get everything tomorrow. And people, if you start to work with government officials, say, oh, you're selling out, or if you don't do it this way, you're not radical enough, or if you're too radical, people say, well, what's wrong with you? Really do become peers to each other and the mental health care for one another as activists and as this youth council. So with that, have a great and healthy weekend and a good end to the year. And in the summertime, you're going to have much more time to hang out with me and tell me even more advice. So let's get together soon, okay? Thank you all. Appreciate it.